Imagine waking up one day to find yourself accused of a crime you didn't commit. You know you're innocent. You believe that truth and justice will prevail. But after hours of interrogation, psychological pressure, and fear, you do the unthinkable. You confess. It sounds impossible, but it happens more often than you think. Today, we uncover real stories of people who falsely confessed to crimes, the devastating consequences they faced, and the truth about why innocent people admit to things they never did. The Central Park Five, a nightmare in New York. It was the spring of 1989 when a crime that would shock America took place. A young woman, known as the Central Park Jogger, was brutally assaulted and left for dead in Central Park, New York City. The attack was horrific, and the pressure to find the culprits was immense. 5 teenage boys, Kevin Richardson, Antron McCrae, Raymond Santana, Corey Wise, and Yusef Salam, were arrested. They were between 14 and 16 years old. The police had no DNA evidence linking them to the crime. But they had something else, a confession. Under relentless interrogations that lasted for hours, with no lawyers or parents present, the boys were worn down. The detectives used deceptive tactics, telling them that if they just admitted to the crime, they could go home. Scared, exhausted, and desperate, they did exactly what the police wanted. They confessed. But their confessions contradicted each other. The details didn't match, because they were innocent. Despite the lack of physical evidence, all 5 were convicted and sentenced to years behind bars. It wasn't until 2002, when the real perpetrator, a convicted rapist, confessed to the crime, that DNA evidence finally proved what the boys had been saying all along. They were innocent. The case of the Central Park Five is one of the most well-known examples of false confessions leading to wrongful convictions. The case of Marty Tankleff, betrayed by the system. September 7, 1988. Marty Tankleff, a 17-year-old from Long Island, New York, woke up to a nightmare. His parents had been brutally attacked in their home. His father, barely clinging to life, was rushed to the hospital, while his mother was found dead. Marty immediately called 911. But when police arrived, they didn't look for another suspect. They looked at Marty. Detectives interrogated him aggressively, telling him his father had woken up and named him as the attacker. That was a lie, but Marty didn't know that. The pressure mounted. The questioning lasted for hours. Confused, scared, and mentally exhausted, Marty started to believe that maybe he had blacked out and done something terrible without realizing it. So when the police presented him with a confession, he signed it. The moment he did, his fate was sealed. Marty was convicted and sentenced to 50 years in prison. But there was just one problem. The confession was false. New evidence showed that the real killer was a business associate of his father. It took 17 years before Marty was finally exonerated. 17 years of his life gone, all because of a confession he never should have made. The tragic case of Henry Lee McCullum and Leon Brown. In 1983, 2 teenage brothers, Henry Lee McCullum and Leon Brown, were accused of the brutal assault and murder of an 11-year-old girl in North Carolina. Henry, 19 years old, and Leon, 15 years old, were both mentally disabled and had IQs below 70. They didn't understand their rights. They didn't know they could ask for a lawyer. They were interrogated for 5 hours. The detectives told them that if they confessed, they could go home. Under pressure, they signed a confession. What they didn't realize was that signing that paper meant the death penalty. Both were convicted and sentenced to death row. For years, Henry and Leon sat in prison, waiting to be executed for a crime they didn't commit. Then, in 2014, after 30 years behind bars, DNA evidence finally proved their innocence. The real killer had been known to law enforcement all along, yet these 2 innocent boys had lost their entire youth. Henry later said, "I never gave up. I knew the truth would come out one day. Why do innocent people confess?" Hearing these stories, one question keeps coming up. Why would anyone confess to something they didn't do? The reality is that false confessions are far more common than most people realize. Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share for more videos.